What happens when a 65-year-old janitor takes his only break of the day to read a book in the corner of a prestigious library? The same library he's cleaned for 20 years, mopping floors while dreaming of stories beyond his reach. A group of young executives in tailored suits notice him. Their laughter echoes through the grand reading room, their phones raised to capture what they call entertainment. The janitor clutches his book tighter, his calloused fingers trembling as someone shouts across the room, "Shouldn't he be cleaning toilets instead of pretending to understand philosophy?" The janitor's eyes stay fixed on the same page, not reading anymore, just trying to become invisible. But what these mockers don't realize is that the quiet man in the black hoodie, sitting in the corner, watching everything unfold, is about to change this story forever. The man stands up, book in hand, and walks straight toward the janitor. The library falls silent as everyone recognizes him. It's Keanu Reeves. What happens next leaves the entire building in shock. James Martinez arrives at the library just as the morning sun touches the grand stone steps. His worn boots make soft sounds against the marble floor, the same floor he's kept spotless for 2 decades. At 65, his back aches more than it used to, but his eyes still hold a spark of curiosity that age hasn't dimmed. Today marks 20 years since he first pushed a mop through these hallowed halls, watching others lose themselves in books while he cleaned around them. The library awakens slowly. James moves through his morning routine with practiced grace, emptying trash bins, wiping down tables, checking each corner with a thoroughness that's become his trademark. But his mind wanders to the small paperback hidden in his jacket pocket, a used copy of Meditations he found at a second-hand bookstore for 50 cents. The pages are worn, marked with previous readers' thoughts, making him feel connected to an invisible community of learners. His small apartment above the local laundromat tells the story of a life lived modestly but with purpose. Photos of his late wife Elena cover one wall. She'd always encouraged his love of reading, even when they could barely afford groceries. Their daughter Isabella, now a nurse working double shifts to support her own daughter's college dreams, calls him every morning. "Dad, you don't need to keep working," she always says. But James knows every dollar he sends her way means one less student loan for his granddaughter Maria. Between cleaning shifts, James finds moments to read. He taught himself English through books, starting with children's stories and gradually working his way up. Philosophy became his passion. The ancient thinkers spoke to him in ways that transcended time and social status. During lunch breaks, he sits in the far corner of the reading room, carefully turning pages with hands rough from years of manual labor, absorbing words that make him feel less alone. The other janitors notice his habit. Some shake their heads, wondering why he bothers. The library staff mostly ignore him. He's part of the background, like the shelves and stairs he maintains. Only Mrs. Boyce, the elderly librarian, sometimes leaves books on his cleaning cart with small sticky notes. "Thought you might enjoy this one, James." These small kindnesses keep him going, especially since Elena passed away 3 years ago. Today, though, something feels different. The morning light streams through the tall windows differently, casting longer shadows across the reading room. James adjusts his name tag, faded but always polished, because Elena used to say dignity starts with the small things. He doesn't know it yet, but this ordinary Tuesday will become the day everything changes, the day his quiet passion for wisdom collides with both cruelty and unexpected kindness, forever altering not just his life, but the very soul of the library he served so faithfully. The late afternoon sun casts long shadows through the library's stained glass windows, marking the start of James's evening shift. The scent of lemon cleaning solution mingles with aged paper as he pushes his cart between the towering oak shelves. His fingers brush against the copy of Meditations in his pocket. His nightly ritual approaches. At 7 p.m., when most patrons head home, James takes his scheduled break in the quiet corner of the philosophy section. The grand reading room stands nearly empty tonight. A few students huddle over textbooks, preparing for exams. Mrs. Boyce organizes returned books at her desk, her silver hair catching the fading sunlight. James finishes mopping the west wing, his movements careful and practiced. The squeak of his wheels echoes softly against marble floors as he parks his cleaning cart behind a column. He settles into his usual spot, a worn leather armchair partially hidden by a massive encyclopedia shelf. The chair bears witness to countless evenings spent in the company of great thinkers. James removes his book carefully, almost reverently. The binding creaks as he opens to his marked page, Marcus Aurelius's words waiting patiently for him. The first signs of trouble arrive with the click of expensive shoes against marble. A group of young professionals enters the reading room, their voices carrying louder than appropriate for a library. Their suits suggest they've come straight from the financial district nearby. James recognizes one of them, Thomas Wheeler, whose father sits on the library's board of trustees. Thomas notices James first. His sudden smirk triggers something in James's stomach, an old familiar feeling from decades of being looked down upon. The group clusters around a nearby table, their whispers punctuated by poorly suppressed laughter. James tries to focus on his book, but their words drift clearly to his corner. "Check this out," Thomas stage whispers, phone already raised. "Our janitor thinks he's a philosopher." More snickers follow. James's hands tighten on his book, his weathered fingers pressing into the worn cover. He's weathered mockery before, but something about this feels different, more public, more deliberate. A woman in the group, her designer heels worth more than James's monthly salary, leans forward. Maybe he's just looking at the pictures? The comment draws more laughter. James feels his face grow hot, but he keeps his eyes fixed on the page, the words blurring slightly. Other patrons begin to notice the commotion. Some shift uncomfortably in their seats, others pretend to be absorbed in their own reading. Mrs. Boyce looks up from her desk, concern crossing her face, but hesitation holds her back. Thomas's father holds significant influence over library operations. The group grows bolder with each passing minute. They take turns snapping photos, presumably for social media. James hears the distinct sound of a video being recorded. His break still has 15 minutes left, but the sanctuary of his reading corner has transformed into an arena of humiliation. "Hey, what's your favorite philosophical concept?" Thomas calls out, his tone dripping with mockery. "The metaphysics of mopping?" More laughter follows. James's chest tightens. The same feeling he had years ago when Elena first fell ill and the hospital staff treated him like he couldn't understand their explanations. A young student at a nearby table glances up, then quickly looks away. James sees himself reflected in the window, an old man in a janitor's uniform, clutching a philosophy book like a shield. The same window shows Thomas and his friends, their expensive watches catching the light as they gesture and laugh. In this moment, as James considers quietly returning to his cleaning cart, accepting defeat as he has so many times before, the library's heavy oak doors swing open. A tall figure in a black hoodie enters, carrying a book under his arm. The man pauses, taking in the scene before him. James doesn't notice him yet. His eyes remain fixed on Marcus Aurelius's words about dignity in the face of ridicule, words that suddenly feel more relevant than ever. The hooded figure moves silently through the reading room, choosing a seat with a clear view of both James and the group of mockers. No one pays him much attention, just another patron seeking evening solitude. But as Thomas prepares to launch another verbal attack, this mysterious observer removes his hood, revealing a face known to millions but carrying an expression few have seen, one of quiet, determined anger. The silence descends gradually, like dust settling after a storm. Thomas and his friends don't notice at first, too caught up in their performance of superiority. But others do. The student who looked away earlier now stares, mouth slightly open. Mrs. Boyce stands straighter behind her desk, her hands frozen over her keyboard. The transformation spreads through the reading room as recognition ripples outward. Keanu Reeves stands up, his movements deliberate and controlled. He carries his own book, a well-worn copy of The Republic, and walks directly toward James's corner. The clicking of phones follows his path, but now they're not aimed at James. Thomas's laughter dies in his throat as Keanu pulls up a chair next to the janitor. "Mind if I join you?" Keanu's voice carries just enough to reach the group of mockers. James looks up, confusion crossing his weathered face. He nods slightly, not yet understanding the significance of this moment. Keanu settles beside him, close enough that their books almost touch. "I see you're reading Marcus Aurelius. One of my favorites." Thomas Wheeler steps forward, his expensive suit suddenly feeling too tight. "Mr. Reeves, we didn't." The words stumble out, but Keanu doesn't acknowledge him. Instead, he leans toward James, genuine interest in his eyes. "Which passage speaks to you most?" Keanu asks, his voice warm and engaged. James's hands steady as he finds his place in the book. For the first time since the mockery began, his voice emerges, quiet but clear. "The part about how wealth doesn't equal wisdom," James replies, his finger tracing the lines. How true character shows in how we treat others, not in what we own. The words hang in the air like a judgment. Several of Thomas's friends shift uncomfortably, their phones lowered now. Keanu nods thoughtfully. You know, I've read this book maybe dozen times. Each reading teaches me something new. He turns to face the group still hovering nearby. Funny how some people spend fortunes on education but never learn the simplest lessons about human dignity. The rebuke lands with precision. Thomas's face flushes red. A woman in his group whispers something about leaving, but he stands rooted, watching his carefully constructed world of privilege crack under Keanu's steady gaze. Mrs. Boyce approaches now, her steps purposeful. Mr. Wheeler, her voice carries surprising authority. If you and your friends aren't here to read or study, I'll have to ask you to leave. The power dynamic has shifted seismically. Thomas opens his mouth to mention his father, but the words die as he realizes how hollow the threat would sound now. Keanu turns back to James, effectively dismissing the group. Tell me about your reading journey. How long have you been studying philosophy? The genuine interest in his voice creates a space where James's passion can finally emerge without fear of ridicule. As Thomas and his friends slink away, James begins to speak. His voice grows stronger with each word, sharing how he discovered philosophy in these very stacks, reading during breaks, learning English alongside ancient wisdom. Keanu listens intently, occasionally nodding or asking questions that reveal his own deep knowledge of the subject. Other patrons drift closer, no longer pretending not to watch but now drawn to the authentic exchange of ideas happening in the corner. A student pulls out her own copy of Meditations. Another asks James about good books for beginners in philosophy. The reading room transforms into something closer to the ancient Greek forums where philosophy first flourished, a place where wisdom matters more than status, where questions matter more than credentials. Mrs. Boyce watches from her desk, tears gathering in her eyes as she witnesses 20 years of quiet dignity finally receiving its due recognition. Keanu notices James's break time is nearly over. He stands, but instead of simply leaving, he turns to address the room. You know what I love about libraries? His voice carries easily now. They're one of the last truly democratic spaces we have. Anyone can learn here. Anyone can grow here. The only qualification needed is curiosity. He places a hand on James's shoulder. Some of the wisest people I've met never set foot in a university. They found their education in places like this, through dedication and love of learning. James stands straighter, his book held proudly now instead of defensively. Mrs. Boyce steps forward again, this time with purpose. Mr. Martinez, I've been meaning to discuss something with you. We're starting a philosophy reading group for high school students. Would you consider leading it? The offer hangs in the air, a bridge between James's past and a new future. Before James can respond, before his ingrained humility can form a polite refusal, Keanu speaks again. I join that group myself when I'm in town. There's always more to learn, especially from someone who's earned their wisdom the hard way. The next morning dawns differently at the library. News of the previous evening spreads through social media, but not in the way Thomas had initially intended. Videos show Keanu Reeves defending the janitor philosopher, creating a narrative that resonates far beyond the library's walls. The story touches something deep in people's hearts, a tale of dignity, wisdom, and unexpected friendship. Thomas arrives early, his father beside him. The elder Wheeler's face bears the strain of damage control. They find James already there, quietly going about his morning routine. The library board hastily convenes an emergency meeting, but before they can begin, a line of students forms outside James's cleaning closet. Each carries a book, eager to discuss philosophy with the man they'd previously walked past without seeing. The transformation ripples outward. The library institutes new policies prohibiting harassment of any kind. Signs appear, everyone who seeks knowledge is welcome here. But the real change happens in smaller, more profound ways. Regular patrons start greeting James by name. Students leave him notes with philosophical questions, which he answers in careful handwriting during his breaks. Thomas's father surprises everyone. Instead of attempting to minimize the incident, he announces a new library initiative, the Martinez Fellowship for Self-Taught Scholars. The program provides resources and mentorship to adult learners pursuing knowledge outside traditional academic paths. James becomes its first recipient, though he initially tries to decline the honor. The young professionals who participated in the mockery face their own reckonings. Their firms, tagged in viral social media posts, require them to attend sensitivity training. But one person's transformation stands out. Sarah Collins, the woman in designer heels who had joked about picture books. She returns to the library, alone, carrying her own copy of Meditations. Sarah finds James during his break. Her apology comes with tears and a story of her own grandfather, a factory worker who loved poetry but never had the chance to study it properly. Together, they begin planning evening philosophy discussions for working people. The designer heels are replaced by comfortable flats as she discovers there's more to learn from James than she ever imagined. Mrs. Boyce watches all this unfold with quiet satisfaction. The reading room's atmosphere shifts subtly but significantly. Suits and uniforms mix more freely. Conversations cross boundaries of class and education. The library becomes what it was always meant to be, not just a repository of books, but a sanctuary for the democratic spirit of learning. Local media picks up the story. A reporter asks James how it feels to become an overnight symbol of intellectual dignity. He responds with characteristic humility. Books taught me that true wisdom isn't about status or degrees. It's about how we treat each other and how willing we are to learn from everyone we meet. The library board, influenced by the positive publicity and genuine community response, creates a new position, Community Learning Coordinator. They offer it to James, suggesting he split his time between his janitorial duties and leading discussion groups. The salary increase means he can finally help his granddaughter with college without working double shifts. Thomas Wheeler makes his own journey toward redemption. The viral video of his mockery costs him a promotion at work, but it teaches him something more valuable. He starts attending James's discussion groups, sitting quietly in the back at first. Gradually, he begins to participate, learning to value wisdom over appearances. The security cameras that captured the initial incident now record a different scene. Evening philosophy discussions where cleaning staff sit alongside executives, where teenage students debate ideas with retirees, where the artificial boundaries of social class dissolve in the pursuit of understanding. Keanu Reeves keeps his promise. When he's in town, he joins the discussions without fanfare, sometimes bringing other celebrities who sit anonymously in the circle of learners. But more importantly, his initial act of solidarity creates a lasting change in how the library community views itself. A month after the incident, James finds an envelope in his cleaning cart. Inside is a leather-bound collection of philosophical works and a note from Keanu, to my friend James, who reminds us that wisdom belongs to everyone brave enough to seek it. The books take pride of place in the reading room's new philosophy section, dedicated to making complex ideas accessible to all seekers of knowledge. 6 months after that fateful evening, James Martinez stands before a packed reading room, his janitor's uniform replaced by a casual blazer during his teaching hours. The transformation extends beyond his clothing. He carries himself differently now, shoulders straight, voice confident as he guides his students through Plato's allegory of the cave. His daily routine has evolved into something he never imagined possible. Mornings still begin with cleaning. James insists on keeping part of his janitorial duties, saying it keeps him grounded. But afternoons transform him into a teacher, mentor, and guide. The Martinez Fellowship has grown beyond the library's expectations, now supporting 15 adult learners from diverse backgrounds. Isabella, his daughter, watches from the back of the room during one of his sessions, tears flowing freely as she sees her father in his element. The nurse who once worried about her aging father working too hard now brags to her hospital colleagues about the philosophy professor who raised her. Her daughter Maria, now in college, dedicates her sociology papers to her grandfather, citing his journey as evidence that education transcends traditional boundaries. The changes ripple through James's personal life as well. His small apartment above the laundromat becomes a gathering place for students who can't make it to formal sessions. The walls, once dominated by memories of Elena, now include photos of his discussion groups, newspaper clippings, and a specially framed picture with Keanu Reeves. Yet Elena's photos remain central. James often tells students how her belief in him laid the foundation for everything that followed. Mrs. Boyce notices other changes too. James starts writing. First just notes for his discussions, then longer pieces about his philosophy of education. His articles, published on the library's blog, attract attention from educational theorists interested in alternative learning models. When a prestigious education journal requests an interview, James insists on having it in the library's reading room, where his journey began. The most profound transformation, however, happens in his understanding of his own worth. The man who once hid his reading from others now engages confidently with academics, challenging traditional notions of who can teach and learn. During one particularly memorable session, a visiting professor from the local university admits that James's practical wisdom offers insights that years of formal education hadn't provided. His granddaughter Maria brings her college friends to his sessions during breaks. They sit spellbound as James connects ancient philosophy to modern challenges, his years of life experience adding depth to theoretical concepts. One student, after a particularly moving discussion about Stoic principles, tells Maria, "Your grandfather makes philosophy feel like coming home." The worn copy of Meditation that started it all sits in a special display case near his teaching corner, alongside the leather-bound collection from Keanu. But James still carries a paperback copy in his pocket. Some habits of dignity persist even after external circumstances change. On quiet mornings, when James still arrives early to clean, he often pauses by the window where he once tried to become invisible. The rising sun catches the library's new motto, etched in elegant script, "Wisdom knows no uniform." He remembers Elena's words about dignity starting with small things, understanding now that his years of quiet reading weren't just preparation for this new role. They were a demonstration of the very principles he now teaches. At home, James starts a new tradition. Every Sunday, he hosts dinner for anyone who wants to come. Philosophy students mingle with cleaning staff. Professors break bread with high school dropouts returning to education. The discussions flow naturally, proving that wisdom indeed knows no bounds. Isabella watches her father during these gatherings, seeing how he's become not just a teacher of philosophy but a bridge between worlds that rarely connect. The man who once silently endured mockery now speaks at education conferences, sharing his vision of learning that transcends traditional barriers. But he never loses touch with his roots. His office remains a converted cleaning closet, decorated with both philosophical quotes and his old cleaning schedule, a reminder of where his journey began. The transformation reaches its most poignant expression one evening when a new janitor, recently hired, apologetically interrupts James's session to clean the reading room. James pauses his lecture, helps the man position his cart more comfortably, and seamlessly incorporates the moment into a discussion about Aristotle's views on the dignity of all work. The room understands. They're witnessing not just a lesson in philosophy, but a living example of how wisdom transforms both the learner and the world around them. 1 year after the incident, the library hosts a special evening celebrating the first graduating class of the Martinez Fellowship. The reading room glows with soft light, every chair filled, every corner holding someone eager to witness this moment. James stands at the podium, his janitor's cart parked proudly beside him, a symbol of where the journey began. Keanu Reeves keeps his promise, arriving quietly through the side door. He takes a seat next to Thomas Wheeler, who now serves on the Fellowship Student Selection Committee. Their conversation flows easily, discussing recent philosophical texts they've shared in James's study group. The transformation in Thomas shows in every gesture, every word, the arrogance replaced by genuine intellectual curiosity. James begins his address, his voice steady and warm. He speaks about his late wife Elena, how she always told him education was a light that never dims. He talks about his daughter Isabella and granddaughter Maria, both sitting in the front row, their faces shining with pride. But mostly, he speaks about transformation, not just his own, but the library's evolution into a true sanctuary of learning. The graduating class represents everything the fellowship stands for. A taxi driver who studied ethics between shifts. A retired mechanic who discovered Socrates at 70. A young waitress who read Kant during break times. Each of them stands to receive their completion certificates, but more importantly, each shares a brief story of how philosophy changed their perspective on life. Mrs. Boyace presents James with a surprise. The library's board has voted to rename the reading room in his honor. The new plaque reads, "The James Martinez Reading Room, where wisdom meets dignity." James touches the plaque gently, remembering countless evenings spent cleaning these same walls, never imagining they would one day bear his name. The evening ends with an unexpected announcement. The Martinez Fellowship will expand nationally, with support from a foundation that Keanu Reeves quietly established. 10 libraries across the country will create similar programs, each maintaining the core principle: wisdom belongs to everyone brave enough to seek it. As the celebration winds down, James returns to his familiar corner. He pulls out his worn copy of Meditations, now held together with tape and faith. Keanu joins him, as do several students. They sit in a circle, philosophy books open, continuing their endless conversation about wisdom, dignity, and the power of learning. The library closes later than usual that night. As James helps stack the last chairs, he pauses by the window where everything changed. His reflection shows not just who he is now, but who he always was, a seeker of wisdom, a teacher at heart, a man who proved that dignity and learning know no boundaries. The last light of day catches the gold lettering of the new plaque, and James Martinez, former janitor, current professor, eternal student, smiles at the perfect justice of it all. A phone illuminates the empty reading room late that evening, recording one final moment. James stands by his cleaning cart, now adorned with philosophical quotes, as he shares a simple truth that needs no complex interpretation. Success isn't measured by the titles we hold or the wealth we acquire. True richness comes from our pursuit of understanding, our treatment of others, and our courage to learn despite any obstacle. The library has changed, but its soul remains the same. Books still line the shelves, waiting for curious hands to open them. The difference lies in who feels welcome to reach for those books now. The janitor's cart still moves through the aisles each morning, but it carries different meaning, a reminder that wisdom appears in unexpected places. The video ends with James reading from his treasured copy of Meditations, his voice carrying the weight of experience. The measure of a person's worth isn't found in their uniform or title, but in their dedication to growth and their respect for others' dignity. The camera pans to show his audience: cleaning staff, executives, students, teachers, all equal in their pursuit of knowledge. Keanu Reeves shared this moment on social media with a simple caption: "True wisdom doesn't discriminate. Neither should we." The post spreads rapidly, but its real impact happens in libraries across the country, where barriers between learners slowly dissolve, where dignity and education intertwine, where janitors and executives sit side by side, sharing insights about life's greatest questions. James Martinez's story reminds us that sometimes the greatest teachers are found pushing a cleaning cart, and the deepest wisdom comes from those who understand that every person carries within them the capacity for profound thought and meaningful change.